Hey folks, my name's Jess, and I bought a lot of books in October, a lot more than I usually buy, so I wanted to do a book haul to show off all the cool things I got this month. First, I got the collected Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark that are written by Alvin Schwartz, but more importantly, illustrated by Stephen Gammell. So I never read these as a kid, but I've always seen them online as some of like the coolest horror things that people have ever been exposed to. They talk about having nightmares about these illustrations, and I kind of missed those back when I was a kid in the 90s, so I thought, hey, I should check those out. So far, I've been flipping through, and some of the stories I could take or leave, but the illustrations really are striking. Like, this is a delightfully creepy illustration that I absolutely love, and there are tons of things like this. Just very, I'm not an art person, so I don't know the right words, but just sort of impressionistic and just visceral in a way that I really like and does seem really strange for a set of children's books. So although the stories can sort of take them or leave them, they seem pretty general, standard fare for kids' stories. The illustrations really do make this worth it, so I'm really glad I have this on my shelf. And so last week I went to Barnes & Noble for the first time in a while, and I have a Barnes & Noble membership, and I don't use it nearly enough, so every time I walk into Barnes & Noble, I always figure, oh, I need to walk out with enough stuff to justify the fact that I buy this membership every year. So the first thing I got is Bird Box by Josh Malerman. I've been meaning to read this for a few years. My sister's been recommending it to me for forever. I read a lot of horror, so she keeps saying this will be up my alley, and I'm really looking forward to it. Next, I got Strange Practice by Vivian Shaw. I don't know much about this book. I think it has something to do with like a doctor for vampires. It's not the most interesting story idea in the world for me, but I really love this cover art, and I've been trying to read more contemporary horror fiction written by women, so this seemed like an interesting place to pick up. I kept seeing it on Goodreads, so hopefully it'll be good. I'm a little on the fence about it in general, but I think it should be interesting and a pretty quick read if nothing else. Next, I got House of Penance, which shows up all the time on Best Horror Comics Ever Written, so I really wanted to check it out. I've been trying to branch again more into horror comics and not just like short stories and classic fiction, because I think it's really easy to get stuck in like, okay, so I've read From Hell, I've read Shirley Jackson, where do I go from here? So House of Penance kept showing up. The art looked really interesting, so I read it recently and I might include it like in a wrap-up video. I thought it was pretty good. It wasn't my favorite, but the art really is striking. I love that there's kind of almost a woodblock carving style to the illustrations. It's so detailed and it's so gnarled and grisly. And the art just does these amazing things with ropes of blood everywhere. So if you're really into like horror and visceral art, I would definitely recommend House of Penance for that alone. Next, I got A.D. After Death by Scott Snyder and Jeff Lemire. I read Witches by Scott Snyder earlier this year, and I thought it was a really interesting and innovative horror story, and I haven't seen witches portrayed quite like that before, and that's a really good one, so I trust his stuff. And I've also read Plutona and the first volume of Sweet Tooth by Jeff Lemire, and I really like his stuff. I want to read more of him, so this is a beautiful addition, and I thought I would pick it up while I was at Barnes & Noble. It's shrink wrapped and I haven't taken it out yet. I want to keep it nice until I actually read it, so I think it's going to stay shrink wrapped until I decide to pick it up for real. So that's everything I got at Barnes & Noble, and then because I hadn't bought enough books, obviously, I went to the Armadillo's Pillow, which is a really cute used bookstore in the far north side of Chicago. The first book that I got is this nice edition of Pride and Prejudice. Usually I don't go in for like the faux leather bound and marble pages sort of thing, but this is absolutely one of my favorite books. I read it for the first time when I was 12 years old. I had just gotten my tonsils out and I was totally out of it, so my mom and I watched the Pride and Prejudice BBC adaptation together, and then I immediately went and read the book because I loved it so much. And so now, every time I get sick or I get really sad, I read Pride and Prejudice. So I've probably read it like 12, 15 times in the last 15 years. You know, this has the nice faux gold on the edges of the pages. And it's a really sturdy book, and so it's just the kind of volume that I want to have in my hands when I'm feeling sick and not great. And this is my go-to book when I do that. So it was only $5 at the used bookstore, and I figure, yeah, that's worth it to have on my shelf because I think I only had it digitally in my Chicago apartment. I also picked up Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. So Pride and Prejudice is embarrassingly the only Jane Austen that I've actually read to date. I really loved it, and I tried to pick up Sense and Sensibility shortly after I read Pride and Prejudice for the first time, But I think that since Sense and Sensibility is Jane Austen's first novel, her writing just wasn't as sophisticated as it eventually got in some of her later novels, so I don't know that Sense and Sensibility was a great thing to pick up immediately after Pride and Prejudice. I'm hoping to go back to it now that I'm a little older, and maybe I'll be able to pick something new up out of it. I've seen the movie adaptation, and absolutely love it, so I'm hoping that next time I give Sense and Sensibility a shot, it really grabs me. Next, I picked up a copy of one of my absolute favorite books, We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. I picked this up from the library several years ago, and it was this same edition, and this is my favorite edition and the only one I want to own of We Have Always Lived in the Castle. I love the cover art. It's absolutely amazing. It has deckled edges and French flaps. And just the interior design is really nice. I really like the spacing. I really like the margins. Yeah, this is just an overall really great edition of this book, and I of course recommend reading it. However, it was Shirley Jackson's last novel, and it's really something else. I think you should really pick this up because it's something special, and I don't quite know how to articulate it. But I think it might be her best novel, and it's a real shame that it was her last, because when you read it, you're like, oh, yeah, I wonder what she would have done if she'd been alive a little bit longer to write more stuff, because We Have Always Lived in the Castle is just so creepy and amazing and just like claustrophobic, and it makes you afraid of your neighbors. It's wonderful. Last one from the Armadillo's Pillow that I picked up is Every Last One by Anna Quindlen. So I've never read any Anna Quindlen before, but back in 2013, I helped organize a charity event where she was the speaker for women in leadership in Denver, and she was an amazing public speaker, and I've been meaning to read her ever since I saw her give that talk. So I read the back matter on this one, and this is apparently about a family and a mom whose son gets depression, and she really reshapes her life in order to take care and support him. I don't know if that's an accurate summary, but it sounded really interesting to me because I'm very interested in portrayals in literature of mental health and mental illness and how that affects people around them. So I really think this should be an interesting read, and I'm excited to get to it. And the last book that I picked up this month was The Beautiful Ones by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. I've been following her on Twitter for about a year now, and I think she has a really strong voice when it comes to representation, especially in genre fiction. I really respect her opinion, and so when I saw she had a new book coming out, I was really excited about that. So I didn't order it early enough to get the physical copy on the day of release, so I got it on my Kindle. I really like the cover art. I think it's striking, and it's sort of a novel of manners plus telekinesis. I have a review planned for it. I finished it earlier this week. Really loved it, and I'm excited to talk to you guys about it. So those were all the books that I bought in October. I'm definitely going to go over a couple of them in my October wrap-up, and I'm really excited to talk to you more about them.